at Ashaya and without, we mine waste for materials and convert them into high quality products and materials that can be sold to consumers while propelling waste pickers into better livelihood. That's what we're trying to do. We're essentially mining
Yeah,
waste, right? Instead of mining deep into the crust of the earth or mining
right.
oceans, we mine waste for high quality materials that are consistent.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of The Voice of Gen Z. I'm particularly excited about this particular one because I'm going to be talking to Anish. He's someone we've worked with very, very closely at Climes. He's someone that I've had the pleasure of interacting with and working with, on a campaign that we did together. And I would love for him to come in and talk a little bit about himself, his journey. Anish, of course, is the founder and entrepreneur of a very, very cool circular economy brand called Without. And It's his baby, so I'm going to let him do all the talking when it comes to his brand and what that's all about, what his journey has been. Without taking too much more time, I'm just going to throw the floor open. Hi, Anish. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dhruvi. Excited to have a conversation with you. I want to quickly introduce Dhruvi as well because she's a badass as well. She does growth at Climes, and I'm just looking at her LinkedIn right now, and look, she's loaded with her experience. She's worked at Good Food Institute, at Wishberry, and now she's helping Climes grow. Big fan of what Climes does. Super excited to have this conversation with you, Dhruvi. What we're building here at Without is a brand that is not just a D2C brand or a B2B brand, right? It's more of a concept. The idea that whenever you buy a product that is associated with Without, it is the most sustainable product out there. Both socially and environmentally, right? So we want you to consume without any worries. We want you to, while we do the hard work of making sure it's the most sustainable product. And our first product was the world's first recycled sunglasses made from packets of chips, or MLP, or which I'll be saying a lot. I'll be saying those three letters MLP a lot today. So MLP stands for metallized multi-layered plastic packaging, or it's a euphemism an anti-euphemism for packets of chips, right? Or chocolate wrappers, or any of these food packaging that have multiple layers. And they're considered impossible to recycle because they're very, they have many layers combined together, including like plastic, different types of plastic, metal, and also cellulose. So we, our patent pending technology extracts raw materials from them to create more recyclable materials, which we can then convert into products like sunglasses, or even eventually sell B2B. But with our stamp of like, hey, look, this is the most sustainable product. These are the most sustainable materials out there from a social as well as an environmental perspective, and we'll talk about the social piece as well.
Yeah, awesome. So, before we actually get a little bit more into Without and the sunglasses and everything else that's happening, could you walk us a little bit about your journey? Like, what has led you here? We know that you've been, of course, in like New York, you've been in Kenya, you've been in lots of different things in lots of different places. What led you back home? And what led to you actually working in a product in the climate and social space? I think that would be a great place to start to just get to know you and your motivation a bit.
Sweet. Yeah, I was born in India. I was 9 years old, but then dad got a job in Dubai. So I spent my formative years in Dubai. And then I did my undergrad in the US in finance and sports management. I was a big sports fan. And then I kind of joined the rat race, wanted to make, a lot of money and kind of just move to New York. I know that was my dream at one point. And then I did kind of move to New York, and I was like one of the youngest directors at the company I was working at. I was making good money. I did apply for my green card. But after all this, I was still depressed, and I didn't understand. That didn't make any sense to me or I couldn't imagine telling somebody, oh, I'm not happy, because they'd be like, hey, but you have everything, So it was very interesting. I think at the same time, it was probably the most important thing that could have happened to me. It was an interesting point of inflection, gave me a chance to reflect. And I realized that I wanted to use the luck and the privilege that I had to do something better with my life. So I wanted to come back to India, work on poverty alleviation through social enterprise. I really believe in entrepreneurship. but I don't want to be that guy from New York who thinks he knows everything, but no, I don't know anything, right? Like I hadn't lived in India for 2 decades, and I knew nothing about the impact space. So after I quit my job in New York, I spent a year in Guatemala working with local entrepreneurs, just to learn by doing, right? By learning, by working in the field. And then I wanted to spend some time in Sub-Saharan Africa as well because statistically it's the most not nice place out there. So I did want to spend some time there. Spent 6 months in Kenya. And then I felt like I got the impact space, right? And I upskilled in London really quickly, did a crash course in data science. And then I came to India. And the goal was, once I came to India, I didn't want to leave, right? Because if you really want to make change happen, you need to dedicate yourself here to a cause or to a place for decades, right? For 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And yeah, started researching poverty. While researching poverty, came across the waste management space, which intrigued me for two reasons. One is there's this big population of waste pickers, 1.5 to 4 million waste pickers who live really shit lives. And at the same time, 50 to 80% of the waste in India is untreated. And I'm like, that's very interesting. You have this untapped potential in waste, and then you have this poor population at the same time. So our thesis became, or our hypothesis became, or our goal became, how do you fundamentally increase the value of waste and use that to empower waste pickers out of poverty? And I think that's what led to the creation of Ashaya, which is the parent company that houses the brand Without.
Right. That's super interesting. Before, again, I think the bulk of our conversation and what I'm sure all of our listeners are very interested about is, of course, Without and what you're doing at Ashaya as a whole. But again, before we get deeper into that, I would love for you to shine a little bit light on, after working in regions which are difficult, like Sub-Saharan Africa, like Guatemala, what are the unique challenges that India comes with? Because I also know that apart from climate, you're also looking at it from a very social perspective and lens, especially when it comes to impacting the lives of waste pickers. So were there any unique challenges when it came to working in the impact sector in India versus those other geographies? Or, do you think it was actually an easier path because you had done the toughest struggle already?
So yeah, that's a really good question, Dhruvi, and I haven't gotten that a lot actually. And it's I don't know if I have a clear answer, to be honest. I think each geography has its own set of challenges, and like for instance in Guatemala, I felt the culture was extremely warm. Like when I went to the office on the first day in Guatemala, everybody says hi to you and kisses you on the cheek, right? Even though you've never met them before in your life. And I found that to be very strange in the beginning. And also I was coming from New York, right? So it was the exact opposite. It was I thought I was oh, these guys have time every morning. I have to say hi to 30 people and kiss them on the cheek. I have better things to do. Because in New York, you don't say hi to anybody. It was a little bit more just, get your stuff going. But then it was so nice and warm in Guatemala, right? Towards the end of my time, I loved greeting everybody. I thought, starting your day off with that was very positive. In Kenya, it was not as warm always, let's say. In India, it's the same as well, right? India also, there's a lot of people are a lot shyer, or just shy. So I think every geography has different things. Look, I work much deeper in India than I did in the other places, right? Because you're still, even though you're working with entrepreneurs, you're working at superficial level, so it's hard to kind of compare. But I haven't in India. It's just sometimes the whole idea of time is very interesting. I think I struggle with that as well. Where 1 week doesn't mean 1 week, 1 month doesn't mean 1 month. So you have to really try to hack that. But I think that's also the case in Kenya and in Guatemala. But no, I think look, my perspective on this is very simple. Is listen, you go whichever country I've had the fortune to work in. I've tried to take the best of what that country has to offer, kind of transfer that over here as well. Try to be more. We try to be more. Greetings in India. I don't think I'm doing a great job like I was doing. In Guatemala, but we're trying to be a lot more friendly and a lot more have some sort of tradition or some sort of habits here in the office that are positive, right? So
I can vouch for that. I think every time we have a call or I've been working with you, I always feel like you take the time to actually set context, have that personal connection, which I think is also important because not just in the impact sector, but overall when it comes to just startups and the fast-paced work world we all live in, you tend to lose that personal connect, which I think is important as a team culture and just generally making everybody's day better. So I do feel
Yeah,
that
no,
experience has
thank you
led.
for saying that. Because today's been a tough day. I've been tough on the team. I've been very stressed out. So it's good to hear that. I need to probably be nicer. But yeah, no, it's very important to keep that sanity, right? Like, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad. Also, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, in general, I think the work experience that you had also lent, in my opinion at least, to the rigor with which you launched your product, right? Like, for example, you spent 2 years in R&D. And of course, again, I can speak from personal experience. When we were working together, there were so many times where, say, we wanted to do something quickly, but you would take your time in terms of like coming back with your thoughts and how it all works. So yeah, would love to know a little bit about your process of homework, especially on the manufacturing and R&D side of things, and in general when you look at launching a product in the climate space.
No, I think that's interesting what you said. But yeah, no, I think the way we like to, I like to function, the way we like to function here at Ashaya is that you move fast on a daily basis, but you move slow overall, right? So there's certain decisions that you can make quickly that you move fast on. There's certain decisions that you take your time with that are more important. That like for instance, and also we do a lot of parallel pathing, right? So what that means is that we start where we think ahead. So like with the launch of the product, we started like 6 months, we started branding and marketing 6-8 months ahead of launching the product. And there were a couple of things there. One was we thought we'd launch earlier. We didn't because we had to get manufacturing in order first. So we got extra time. But we even before that, we were like 3 months ahead, right? The idea was that, look, things take time. So let's move. Let's make sure we plan ahead. So even when I was talking to you, when it came to Climes and integrating Climes into our workflow, in the list of priorities, it wasn't the highest. But I wanted to get ahead of that. So that's why I had a conversation like maybe 2 or 3 months ahead with you guys, being like, hey, it's something we want to do. Let's keep a tab on this. So I think that's how we like to function. That every day, we make sure we plan in a way that we are moving fast and getting things done that are more short term. But then you also parallel pathing and you have long term projects. So like you have daily deliverables that we try to like move quickly on, or like weekly deliverables that we move quickly on. But there's certain things you can move slowly on as well. So finding that right balance has been very crucial. But like I think what's worked really well for us is planning ahead. Like I think we made one of the biggest calculated risks we took was that we right in the middle of the pandemic, we ordered our most important machine, our twin screw extruder, which was our biggest investment. We spent close to like 40 lakhs on this, and this was like my money, right? So I was investing my own money into this without ever looking at a twin screw extruder. We tried really hard because we're like, hey, we looked at a lot of videos, we obviously read a lot of books, but we couldn't go to see one because everything was closed. There's nothing close by, and turns out there are not many lab scale twin screw extruders. So we made the difficult choice of like, okay, listen, we have to pull the trigger on this, and that was great because that they told us it would take them 3 months to make that machine. It ended up taking them 6 months to make that machine, right? So if we had delayed it by another 3 months, that's us having I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like just knowing when to make those decisions because right. and then also planning ahead so that okay, that this is gonna come in 6 months. So it was so funny. I was like, hey, they said 3 months. Let's assume 4 months to 5 months, right? And they even we tried to solve for that. And we wouldn't be able to. So I think just knowing. Like, so parallel pathing, super important, has been super helpful for us. Right. And I think that's something that I learned from my experience as well, because in my job in New York, we were always juggling like so many different things. There were so many different projects that were really deep and intense that were running parallelly. So we always, I think that was good experience to kind of translate to the work we're doing here.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I never knew about this entire twin screw extruder and the story behind it. So that's super cool to know. And I'm sure it was a stressful time period. But, so you've touched a little bit upon the manufacturing and like how that was unique. But in general, when it comes to working with a material that's extremely new, that's not traditionally being, of course, used in making of sunglasses or any product whatsoever, what are some of the unique challenges that come with working on a new stream of material, working on a new product altogether, but also in terms of like then convincing a team to work on it with you together, or when it comes to branding for that particular product? So any challenges or any learnings that you've had in terms of working with a new material like MLP? And I'm sure a lot of listeners would love to learn from your experience there.
So I think I don't know about challenges, but I mean there were lots of everything every day was a challenge, right? I think the biggest challenge was skepticism. Like most people who told us was like, don't listen, just don't. This is really hard. Doesn't make sense. Don't do it. So lots of skepticism in general, and with reason, right? Because this is there's a reason why it's so hard to recycle this plastic waste. So I think the challenges we faced were a little bit more mental, right? Like, hey, is it worth going down this route? But I think our motivations were very clear. I think there are two things unique about our motivations. One was that we are truly trying to solve a social and environmental problem. Like if we were doing this to make money, we would not start with MLP, right? There's enough things that can be recycled that are not being recycled, or can be recycled better, that are a lot more lucrative, like PET, HDPE, even e-waste for that matter, right? So we wouldn't have started with MLP, but we were focused on solving a problem, which was MLP, right? And that made us very committed and motivated to actually solve a problem. And when you talk to everybody in the field, MLP is the black sheep. It's the notorious thing. Nobody seems to be able to have a solution for. And the second thing was that really helped was that we had a clear focus on what our end goal was. And it was not very precise. It was not very vague. It was very motivational, maybe if I can use that word. Basically, it was like we wanted to fundamentally increase the value of MLP. Right? How do you increase the economic value? It wasn't about recycling it, but increasing the economic value. Because if you increase the economic value of this waste, all of the incentives align, right? So I remember we literally started off with one piece of one Lay's packet, like here, one magic masala packet, one of these magic masala packets. And we looked at it, and we studied the crap out of it. And we were like, what can we do to increase the value of this, right? And so one of the things always was separation, right? Like MLP has many layers. So your goal was to start separating the layers out in a cost-effective way. And most solutions that existed either burnt the MLP or they compressed it into boards and stuff. Which again, I mean, none of them. I don't want to hate on these solutions. They're good solutions. We need these solutions, but they're not ideal because you're either destroying all the value or you're delaying the inevitable. And with the new material, because we were separating the materials and we wanted to separate the materials, we wanted to create a new material that is way more recyclable. And I say new in quotes because it's essentially recycled plastic only, right? It's not like a new type of polymer. It's just plastic that already exists. We use a combination of polypropylene and polyethylene for our sunglasses. So those two motivations were really good. We're not doing this to make money. We're trying to solve problems. The second, we knew what our end goal was: increase the fundamental economic value of this of the MLP. And there was no one way. It wasn't chemical engineering. It wasn't mechanical engineering. It was no, everything is fair game. Magic, voodoo, homeopathy, anything, right? Would work, right?
But if I may ask you to just go a little bit deeper on why is MLP the black sheep? So I mean, of course, this is something you do day in, day out, so you're very familiar with it. But for example, I don't understand in terms of why is MLP such a problematic sort of area of waste compared to other plastic waste. So yeah, what made you pick that?
So there's a plethora of reasons, but one of the main reasons it's really not good is that it has multiple layers, as I mentioned, right? So, and that's not just multiple layers of plastic, but of other materials like metal and sometimes cellulose. Tetra Pak has cellulose or paper, and also with plastics, there are different types of plastics: PP, PE, and different types of polypropylene, different types of polyethylenes, sometimes PET, PVC, sometimes nylons. There's a big kitchery of things, and sometimes there can be 3 layers, sometimes it can be up to 8 layers, it can be 5 layers, and also a chips packet is different from a chocolate wrapper, is different from a Tetra Pak. So there's always this inconsistency. So you have multiple layers, you have this inconsistency, and that's a recycler's nightmare, right? A recycler wants clean, one material, no complications, because when you try to mix different materials, they're different chemistries, they're different chemical compositions of each of these materials, right? So if you try to do them, if you try to treat them together, it's like taking different species of animals and trying to grow them up or treat them
the lack of uniformity, if I may
the lack of
it.
So that was so lack of consistency, the multiple layers, even if it was consistent, let's say, but there was still 5 layers. That's also a problem, right? So multiple layers, inconsistency, and then also it's super high volume, which means that 1 kilo is like a truckload of MLP, right? So transporting it might not be very heavy, but it's you need lots of trucks because you can't just squeeze, it's very high volume material. So that's why it also for a waste picker, it's more work, like to pick up one wrap, like picking up one bottle of PET and picking up one wrapper of MLP is the same amount of net work for a waste picker. But a bottle goes for, I mean, a kilo of bottles go for 30 rupees a kilo, and it's like much more mass, right? Like you're picking up maybe like 10 grams or something of plastic. Whereas if you pick up a packet of chips, it's like 5 grams and it's like very light. So and it's just double the amount of work. So there's nobody wants to deal with this.
Right. Yeah. It's basically, I think, like a problem that nobody wanted to touch, essentially. You've also actually always maintained that Ashaya is not just an environmental project, it's also a social project. So could you also tell us a little bit more about how are people's lives in terms of like waste pickers, the actual, like, people on ground, how are their lives actually being impacted by the product you're building?
So that's my personal burning is more around poverty, like in general. So the social element of what we do is very interesting. But outside of my burning, like if you analyze the waste management space, especially in countries like India, you realize that it's not just an environmental issue, right? You have 1.5 to 4 million waste pickers who live really multi-dimensionally poor lives, which means that it's not just access to income, but I mean, they don't make good money, to say the least. But it's also access to healthcare, access to education and dignity. Like these are low caste migrant workers primarily. Like 30% of waste pickers in Pune have been bitten by dogs. The life expectancy of a waste picker can be as low as 39 years of age. Like it's not. Plus, they're working in waste all day, right? With they don't necessarily use PPE as much as well because they don't see it's worth their money to invest in PPE. So it's really crap, right? So when we're trying to build a solution, we're like, we have to integrate the waste pickers in a way that that they are not negatively impacted by this, obviously, but in fact they're positively impacted by this, right? Because guess what? Like India has one of the highest rates of recycling plastic in the world, but between 30 to 60%, depending on who you believe, and that's mainly because of waste pickers, right? Because it's sad. Why? Because they make money off of it, right? So it's like 50% of the income of a waste picker is plastic waste. So when you think of banning plastic, it's a bit more complicated in India. You can't just imagine someone took away 50% of your livelihoods. So when we were thinking of solutions, we're like, the waste pickers have to be at the heart of this. In fact, waste has this untapped value. Let's increase that value and let's make sure waste pickers don't exist, right? I don't think waste picking should be an occupation. But if we're displacing waste pickers, it has to be a positive displacement into better livelihoods. So we do a bunch of things. One is we integrate them into our supply chain, giving them formal, dignified labor. Which is, small wins for now. 10% of our sales goes towards keeping children of waste pickers in school. And this is important, right? You want to break the chain. You want to break the chain and make sure that the children don't end up being waste pickers. And also we buy our waste directly from a waste picker collective. And we pay them a premium for waste that previously nobody was buying. So it's truly additional income for them, right? But all of these three things are touching the surface. In the long run, we really want to work on getting them to permanently into better livelihoods, into livelihoods of a lot more agency, where they have a lot more choices.
Right. In the longer run, in terms of products as well, right? Because obviously all of these dreams will be achievable once there's more scale, once there are more products. So of course your sunglasses are a hit. We love them at Climes. But what else do you have like in the pipeline? What else are you planning?
So we are upgrading our sunglasses, and we're trying to just improve them. We're also coming up with a green version. I want to show you the green version. 1 second. Green or gray, depending on who you ask. But yeah, so we have a new color version also that we're trying to come up with because people have asked for different colors, and we get a green naturally, right? So we're gonna add some colors to it. We are coming up with a design that's a little bit more out there that we will hopefully share in the next few months. So we're trying to improve the sunglasses vertical, and we're adding more designs. We also do coasters, so we're adding more designs to the coasters, and we are going to work on lamps as well over the next 3 to 6 months, and maybe furniture. So those are the 4 verticals: lamps, eyewear, coasters, and furniture that we'll probably explore. But look, B2C is very much is our R&D, right? Like in the end, our game, if you want to solve the waste problem, like sunglasses and coasters aren't going to solve the waste problem, right? This is just a proof of concept. Eventually, we want to sell materials to manufacturers, and we want our materials to be what's unique about our materials is that they're of high quality, which means that they're close to virgin like mechanical properties. They are consistent. You want to get consistent material properties, and they come from the worst possible waste that is not recycled. There's truly like additional value here, right? So I think that's what makes it unique. But I mean, it's still not perfect. We still have some long way to go.
Awesome. So I had no idea actually, Anish, that you guys are also looking at B2B. And are you already seeing some interest from industry? And what are the different kinds of industries that you would eventually hope the materials, go back into?
So we are, right? I think if you ask any brand, they want sustainable materials. Like it's like there's quote unquote unlimited demand for this, right? The catch always is a combination of they want good quality material that's highly consistent at the right price, right? And obviously, and is sustainable. But if it's sustainable material that's inconsistent at a high price and as like low quality, then it's like they're like, well, we can't do this, because then the same consumer that demands sustainability is upset because our sunglasses broke. This was not great. This was not great, right? So you have to really cater to the whims of a consumer who wants everything, right? And so the manufacturer is like, hey, we want sustainable material, but it's got to meet our price point, and it's got to meet our quality standards, it's got to meet our consistency. So I think that's, I mean, so when we talk to folks, they're very excited about it. What we can't deliver on right now is like we can't deliver large quantities of material, right? Because a big manufacturer wants tons of material, and we can't buy tons of material from our lab that does 5 kilos a day. That's why going to product also made sense, because we can produce 500 sunglasses. Right? But no, the conversations are going. We are working with big FMCG manufacturers, with eyewear manufacturers. We've sent samples for testing. We've sent technical data sheets. But these conversations last a long time. They take a long time, True. Right? And in fact, going to product has allowed us to reach brands much quicker. Like we've been able to communicate with the biggest brands very quickly and have gotten them to test our product and material within a couple of months, right? Normally it takes about 18 months to even like get them to test a sample for you, right? We already have done that. So the process can move much faster while still being independent, because we can generate our own revenue, which also becomes great R&D for us because we get feedback on the material. So, right. So B2C is actually like a R&D, it's a big R&D play for a B2B, material sales in the long run, right? But that just takes time, and we don't want to be that company that just sits, wants to raise money and it sits, we are pre-revenue, but we can't, because, these contracts take very long to process. I want to build a healthy company in the sense that economically healthy company that's able to generate revenue and survive while building for a B2B pipeline.
Yeah, no, that's a super interesting launch strategy, if I may call it that, which is that you can actually get a foot in the door with these huge corporations by giving them something tangible in hand, as opposed to a PowerPoint presentation. So I think that's a really good note, to take away from this. Coming more towards, your D2C launch itself, while you're saying it's, of course, very R&D oriented, we feel you're being humble because the launch became like sort of viral on social media. We had so many different publications picking it up. If I'm not wrong, you sold out fairly faster than, what you had imagined and estimated as well. So talk us maybe a little bit through how you converted this fairly complex product to be like very digestible to the Indian consumer, and why do you think this created the level of excitement that it did?
So there were a few things that I think that's what it was a little rewarding, I think, in general, because our work is genuine, right? We're not like just a gimmicky thing that is like, let's just do something and let's create like a GoFundMe campaign or something and then let's raise some funds. Like, no, we're doing this work for the last 2 years. It's very real. So it's not just a gimmick, not a story. The story itself actually encapsulates real work that is, so that was, so when we said the story, we were glad that it resonated with people, right? Because the story needs to be strong as well. And then your ability to communicate that story needs to also be strong. If either or are strong, then it's not enough. Like if just a story is strong, but you can't communicate it. If you have really good communication, then you might, go viral, but then people will look under, start peeling the onions, can be like, oh shit, these guys aren't legitimate. It's just a GoFundMe campaign, right? So I think, one of the couple of things we doubled down on was that we wanted to emphasize this was packets of chips, right? And it's not just packets of chips. It's chocolate wrappers, it's Tetra Pak, it's it's your atta ka pack and all of those things, right? But we couldn't say all of that, and we couldn't say MLP, like, oh, made from MLP, and then people were like, what is MLP, right? So we doubled down on packets of chips, and I think that's really resonated with the consumer, because not only from a recycling perspective, but also the visceral nature of the packet of chips becoming sunglasses was very powerful. So that landed, and then I think our video did really well. We didn't expect the video to do. We worked really hard on the video and the script and the brand and and we spent a lot of time on this. And I think all of that did pay dividends. There's also, I'm sure, an element of luck. But I think what I really enjoyed was that the take-through was good, right? Where sometimes you see a viral video and then you're like, this is, it's like a dumb viral video, or like, it's like not really, it's like, it's a meme, But when people enjoy, it's cool, let's double click, it's actually cool. I hope at least that's what I hope people felt. I think from the reactions we've gotten, there was this like completeness to it that was really powerful.
No, that's amazing. I genuinely feel like because there's so much noise out there, it really cut through the social media clutter, because it showed, like you said, a very tangible product going into a very tangible product. So like from a packet of chips to sunglasses, it's here. That's the proof in the pudding. And I think that's what I think eventually lent to the cutting of the clutter as well. So yeah, props to you and the team for getting the branding and the launch right. And we're all very, very excited to see the new line of products as well that you showed us a little bit of earlier. Now moving on to a fairly loaded question. I see this term going around a lot, and I also feel like without an Ashaya, I've been associated with this term a lot, which is circular economy, right? Could you tell us a little bit about how you approach this? What does it mean to you? And is it a lens through which you're looking at your work?
Yeah, 100%, right? So there's a lot of different definitions of circular economy, and a lot of a bastardization of the term, actually.
Yeah.
I think I've read a lot of books on this and a lot of literature. I think the best book on this that I've read is Cradle to Cradle by William McDonough and Michael Braungat. And they're a combo of an architect and a chemist, right? And their work on the circular economy and just circular materials is like that. The principles that they espouse are something that we hold very strongly in what we do. And what they kind of talk about is, circular economy in its like very plain definition is just being able to use the same material over and over and over again. Like everything is circular, everything, you're not creating net negative things for the environment. But they go a level deeper, right? Where, for instance, one of the concepts they talk about is not mixing the biological materials with the non-biological materials, which means that you don't want to mix cellulose or plant-based things or anything that is like coming organically, like paper, which is cellulose, like glass. You don't want to mix that with synthetic materials like plastic, or also like things like metal, right? You want to keep them separate. And as long as you keep everything in their own lane, that's what makes things more circular. And the other thing they talk about that is very interesting is that they want, I think we need to think of, and there's a lot of negativity in this space, which is, I understand where it's coming from, but it's a lot about like, hey, don't consume, don't travel, don't have kids, like stop breathing, like all of these things, which I think are not sustainable, right? Like, I think what they espouse, and I believe strongly, is that how do we create humans to be net positive assets to this earth, right? Versus net negative assets, which means that, and also like to embrace what it means to be human, which is to live in joy and to experience and to live in abundance, right? But can it be a positive abundance, a net positive abundance? Like they give one example of the infinite shower, right? So everyone loves a hot shower. But it's really bad. It's very bad for the environment. But we still love our hot showers, right? And a hot bath. So what they say, what if we can create a shower that infinitely recycles the water, right? So that way you don't feel guilty about taking a hot shower, right? Obviously, this is hard and whatever. It's a metaphor, but that's what I strongly believe, right? How can we create solutions that allow us to live a fun life without having to like compromise, right? And I think that's so that's something that's what I like to think about from a circular economy, is that how can we reuse resources in a way that is net positive for the earth, right? Versus a net negative, which is what it is right now.
Yep. No, that's super interesting. I definitely relate to that principle as well. In fact, even at Climes, I think the entire ethos is about involving consumers, involving brands to take climate action that's positive, that's easy to do, that's, not just necessarily about a moral lens, but also about what net positive one can do in terms of like giving to nature-based solutions and actually letting the consumer engine move forward, let that tick away, because that's going to, regardless of all of the other naysayers. But at the same time, get environment and climate involved in that movement rather than look at it as something that is antagonistic to it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
absolutely, definitely relate to that answer there. And then also segueing into Climes and our partnership with you, right? Would love to know about why you thought it'd be a good idea to, get us involved right from the launch, which is that make sure that all of your deliveries were now not just carbon neutral, but actually carbon positive, because you went ahead and offset more, than you used up in terms of the last mile delivery as well. It being an already sustainable product, why did it make sense for you to, go ahead and do this extra mile? Would love to know. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think first of all, I've known Climes for like almost since the beginning, and I've known Ani and seen his journey through. So always wanted to, always want to work with fellow entrepreneurs and fellow startups that are trying to do similar things in this space. So that's one reason. But also, like, we also look at, you don't just do that for that, right? It still has to be a win-win or some sort of like, exchange that is mutually beneficial. So I think I was like, I knew I wanted to see, we're trying to make the most sustainable product out there, and what are things we can easily do to make that happen. Neutralizing carbon footprint is super simple, and Climes has made it so easy, right? Like we have to do nothing, right? Almost nothing, literally. And you guys it's been so easy to work on that, to just kind of be like, hey, we spend 2 rupees a delivery to get it neutralized, right? Now that to me is a cost we're willing, like happy to give and pay for, right? Because also we're not profit maximizing as a company, right? For me, this is a necessity. Like this is a part of our DNA. So it just made sense to work with clients because they're already building the infrastructure for this, something that we want to do. And yeah, so I was like, and you make it easy for us. So I think that was a no-brainer from my perspective. And yeah, and I think it's been fruitful, and I hope and I mean, I know I keep complaining to you about this. It's like, we're so tiny, we're not meaningful for you, and I'm sorry about that. Like, hopefully when we grow, we'll be more meaningful as a client. But like right now, it's very tiny amounts. But I think that's the ethos, right? We want to build, like, every part of our process we've built in such a way that it's scalable, right? Because we don't want to do like hacks, because hacks aren't scalable in the long run. We want to be as scalable as possible. So while we're small with Climes, everything will hopefully scale, and then hopefully that is going to be a win-win for all of us.
Hey, from our perspective, I don't think any of us would be in the sector if we didn't believe that all the drops eventually amount to the ocean, right? So nothing is too small. I think we're super excited to have your consumers at least get an opportunity to then also understand that not just is their product that they have in their hand completely sustainable, but also the fact that the way it got to them was neutralized, and they can now choose a nature-based solution that they relate to, choose a project that they actually want that 2 rupees or that one client to go to. And I'm excited to see how your initial early adopter consumers actually react to it, and how many of them choose what project. That's always super intriguing to us. And yeah, excited to do more as you grow as well. I would also actually love to know from you, because I know you read a lot and you write a lot about, your journey on climate. What are the top, maybe say 3 resources that you would recommend to someone starting off in their journey, someone who wants to maybe say set up a new venture in this space, or someone who's maybe just curious about learning more about India and climate per se, right? What are some of the resources that you anchor back to?
So when it comes to plastics, I think you want, like, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is just the most thorough resource out there. Their reports are great, holistic. So anything to do with plastic, just go to Ellen MacArthur Foundation and you can read any of the reports that are very very holistic. When it comes to the idea of climate change, I think there are a couple of things that'll be a little bit controversial. One is, I think you should read Cradle to Cradle by William McDonough and Michael Braungart. I think I highly recommend reading that book to understand not only circular economy, but also the way they look at climate and earth and environment and humans. I think they say something very interesting. And no, that's Kalaari. Okay, so yeah, that's true. Number 3, what I would highly recommend everybody to read, especially if you're working climate change, is this book called False Alarm by Bjorn Lomborg. And why it's really important is because it's the critic, right? It's the critique to climate change, right? Whereas we've made it a center of our lives, he's coming from a perspective being like, hey, maybe it's not as crazy as we think it is. And these are the reasons why. And I think us as being front and center in climate, we should be cognizant of our critics. We should also be having a holistic perspective and understanding where they're coming from. And I mean, there are lots of critics of climate change, right? Bjorn Lomborg isn't one that like he doesn't deny climate change, for instance. Like, he's like, yeah, climate change is real, but here's like the problem in its complexity, right? So I think just having a more holistic look on the entire thing is very important. It made me smarter, right? And it's made me more realistic about what we want to solve, how we want to solve it, how can we look at things holistically, and not be blinded by our biases, right? So I think I think maybe those are some resources to, and I mean I can list some more, but I think those are good places to start.
Thank you. That sounds like an interesting list. I'm sure I'm definitely going to go and look up some of these. I think coming now to probably some of the last questions that I had, at least on my list, and would love to probably take some from you if you want to ask us something. But I would love to also pick your brain on how you're looking at social media as an engine. I know you said that like B2B is the ultimate goal because that's what's going to move the needle for scale. But how are you today as a social first or climate first brand leveraging social media rather than letting it, I guess, be a burden in terms of just noise and things you need to feed into it to keep it going?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not very happy with our social media strategy right now. We just very understaffed. We're trying to in the middle of trying to raise a round, trying to build a team. So I'm not nowhere close to where I want to be with social media. But I think it's a very important level. But as a brand, we're trying to be something. I'd like to think a little different than other climate-centric brands. For one, we are not trying to be negative or fatalistic about everything, like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. I think that's not our style. We're trying to be positive, like, hey, we're trying to be fun. We're trying to, and at the same time, we're letting our work talk, right? Like, you see the depth of the work that we're doing. So we want the work to be saying, look, like, this is, we're tackling some of the hardest stuff and we're making it into high quality. We don't want to kind of be like, hey, you're a bad person for flying or, or something like that, even indirectly, right? So we're trying to be positive about that. And that's something we want to embody in our collaboration. So you can see the colors, even a word without, it's a negative word, but it's supposed to be like, hey, consume without worry. So once that positions in your mind is like, hey, without worries or without qualms or without guilt, I think we want that to sit in your head. So I think that's I see that as a very important level, but I also don't want to be those I don't want to be an annoying brand that's like constantly putting stuff out there that's like not just for the sake of being relevant on your screen. I think we want to be very particular. Like one thing we're going to try and change is that like sometimes when brands are tagged, every time they're tagged, they repost the tag on their story, but that's so annoying. Like for a consumer, you're like, I don't care that some random person tagged about you. Like you're just trying to show off. Like we want to try and think about that more like, hey, let's just be real. Let's be fun. We don't have to be in someone's feed every day. We can be once a month and be a nice reminder as to why we're doing well. So we want to work on that. Because see, the idea is, even though we're doing B2B in the long run, Without is still going to be a brand we want to build and then sell as a co-brand to people, right? So let's say if we're doing something with Titan Eye, right? They want to make sunglasses with us. It'll be Titan Eye X without, right? Where we will provide the materials and the credibility, because the Titan Eye is not known necessarily for its sustainability as much, right? So they can buy that sustainability from us. So that way the brand value really matters. Like we need to build that trust amongst our consumers, and we are trying hard to do that, but we're also like really understaffed. So while I think I have a direction as to where we want to go, are we executing on it? Not right now.
Yeah, I think it's just startup life, right? Like everything is always happening all at once, and it always seems like too little in terms of number of hands on board. But I'm sure you guys will figure it out. The podcast itself is called The Voice of Gen Z. Who, according to you, is an actual Gen Z consumer? Is the Gen Z consumer also the consumer at Without? And could you shed a little light on, was it surprising to you in terms of demographics, or who is really shopping for sustainable products today, or your products?
So it wasn't really surprising, I think. It wasn't just Gen Zs, it was a lot of millennials as well, and some older folk. But it was, I think what was obvious was like that it was mainly high income people from tier 1 cities, right? I think that was not surprising at all. But I do think we're trying to tackle the Gen Z millennials between the ages of 24 and 35. So it's kind of like not fully Gen Z, because they also, I mean, the younger you are, the less disposable income you have, just from a data perspective. So trying to find the right balance there. But yeah, I mean, I think I remember one early customer messaged us, "Oh, super excited about your brand. Oh, super cool. But I really find your glasses to be very boring. Do you have some other designs? They're too conventional." I'm like, oh, yeah, because we went with a very safe, like Wayfarer-esque design, right? I think we're coming out with something a little bit more crazy that we don't think will sell, but like it'll make this customer happy. But no. But I think no. I think it's. Look, I think sustainability is. There's been also the one market we're trying to explore more or thinking about is like young professional mothers, right? They, and even like coming up with like sunglasses for children, for instance, is an interesting target group that people have told us. Like the number of people have told us make like sunglasses for children has been like so many. So we're just trying to explore some of those verticals. We're not like super tied to. I mean, we're still in this exploratory phase, but yeah, it seems to be like I don't think we're hitting a new market, right? But what I do like to say to the team is that, we want to also try and bring in the folks that are on the edge, right? So you have the people who are very sustainability, who compost, who are zero waste, who are very good, right? But there's another population of people that doesn't necessarily do that, but still care about sustainability, but they are maybe more lazy, like the lazy sustainability folks. I think that's what we also want to focus on them as well, because we just give them. I mean, we make it easy for them to be sustainable, right? I think that's something that we want to try and tackle.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are so many people on the edge and they just get a bit confused because there's so much information out there. And making it easy, making it fun is, I think, part of the entire idea of making like Gen Z be something that's like default choice, not something that you are forced to do because it's morally good. So that's also how we look at things.
Well put, yeah.
Amazing. So I think with that, would love to wrap it up from my end. Would love to take any questions from you. If you want to also just end with any last thoughts for our listeners.
No, I'm really curious. What is the Climes long-term play, right? What are you guys hoping to achieve, and where do you see yourself 10 years?
I think Climes has always had like a very focused North Star, which is how many kilos of carbon dioxide and emissions are you moving, and what's the best way to do that? So as you know, the last like couple of months as well, we've been experimenting and actually also launching initiatives in lots of different categories and sectors because again, like you said, the idea is to not let this be marginalized, but actually open it out to scale to as many people and as many consumers as possible. And we do that through partner brands. So be it like events, we did one with a corporation, a huge corporation like Marico, to at the same time also partnering with a lot of Gen Z brands that are doing a lot of the good work in e-commerce and other industries, making shopping a more climate-friendly experience, having brands actually gift folks a climate reward that they can then just claim. But I think the core differentiator is always going to be that while there are lots of different ways to take climate action, with Climes, we want to enable consumers to have accountability and transparency. So right to the last kilo, right, have that entire life cycle of where exactly you have chosen to give the Climes either that you've bought or you've been gifted by a brand, and then what's happening to that project. So say, for instance, I have decided as a consumer to give my money to a tree plantation project in Uttarakhand that we're supporting. After 6 months, has there actually been an increase in forest cover? What can we really promise as a brand to also then increase trust and increase recall in an industry that's just so new and with so much noise? I think that's always the plan. However, we can do it in terms of involving as many brands and as many consumers as possible through various ways, from shopping to events, to, obviously other more deeper exercises in terms of actually working with a few companies on neutralizing their entire operations or looking at deep end of value chain and supply economics. So yeah, we're looking at things from various perspectives, but the North Star remains common across all.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think you'll have that focus, which is really important. But yeah, no, thank you for having me and giving me the platform to be able to have this conversation with you, and also for the work that you all do, and the fact that we can also work with you as a small brand. I think that's really exciting to see. In this ecosystem, it's so interesting what's happening here in the Indian ecosystem. I can't wait for this to grow bigger.
Exciting times. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. I enjoyed our conversation a lot. I hope our listeners also could find it interesting and entertaining, and yeah, lots of more work to do together soon.
Yeah, if the listener is listening right now, he's probably enjoyed it. Otherwise he would have dropped off ages ago, right?
That's true. All
right, man. Thanks.
Thank you.